Shout out to Blue Collar Sports TV.
Yo, what is up, guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this video is a quick preview and prediction for Patrick Teixeira versus Brian Castano. This fight goes down on the 13th of February and it is for the WBO Super Welterweight title. That belt currently is held by Patrick Teixeira. He was elevated from interim champion to full champion. In my opinion, this one should actually pan out to be quite a fun fight. Both guys have relatively exciting styles, and when these two guys meet in the ring, I think those styles are going to complement each other, which will result in a really good fight. So I'm looking forward to this one. 13th of February, you guys should really check this one out. Oh, and by the way, one more ingredient which really makes this fight special is the fact that it's an Argentinian versus a Brazilian. There's a lot of built-in rivalry there. Think Mexico versus Puerto Rico. If you follow soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, that rivalry between Brazil and Argentina is something else. So I'm hoping that actually spills over in this fight and it motivates these guys that bit more because it's going to result in an even better fight. So there's that ingredient as well. But let's briefly run through the tale of the tape. And it's only right to start with the champion Patrick Teixeira. Now, Patrick Teixeira has a record of 31 wins, 1 defeat, 0 draws. 22 of those 31 wins come by way of knockout. Brian Castano has a record of 16-0 with 1 draw. 12 of those 16 wins come by way of knockout. Patrick Teixeira is listed as 5'11.5 with a 76.5 inch reach, whereas Brian Castano is listed as 5'7.5 with a 67.5 inch reach. So Patrick Teixeira, in terms of height and reach, is significantly bigger than Brian Castano. He's got a 4-inch height advantage and a considerable 9-inch reach advantage. Is that going to play a factor on fight night? Well, Patrick Teixeira, best hope it does, because I think that's going to be a key to victory in this fight. He needs to utilise that. But anyway, we'll carry on with the tale of the tape. Patrick Teixeira, he is a southpaw. Brian Castano is an orthodox fighter. Patrick Teixeira, 30 years old. Brian Castano, 31 years old. And also in regards to the fight totals, I know Patrick Teixeira has a lot more fights than Brian Castano, but I don't believe he's actually necessarily more experienced than Castano. Castano had a very good amateur background. He fought in the World Series of Boxing, and as a pro, despite having less fights, I would say Brian Castano's fought better competition. We're talking about guys like Michel Soro, who's a real good fighter, and of course Erislandy Lara, who's been one of the top guys at Super Welterweight for the best part of a decade now. So yeah, I actually believe going into this fight, Brian Castano might actually have the superior high-level competition when you actually take into account amateurs, World Series of Boxing, and the level of competition he's fought as a pro. But that's the tale of the tape out of the way. Let's break down what both guys have to do and then obviously get onto my official prediction for this fight. I guess we'll start with the champion Patrick Teixeira. Now, obviously in the tale of the tape, we saw that Patrick Teixeira is significantly taller and longer than Brian Castano, and Patrick Teixeira really needs to utilise those physical advantages to win this fight. Brian Castano is more of a pressure fighter. He's more comfortable up close or at mid-range. On the outside, he can box, but that's not really his forte. That's not his strong point. So Teixeira needs to keep Brian Castano at arm's length. Problem with Teixeira, from what I've seen in numerous fights, for such a tall, long-rangey guy, he doesn't use that jab anywhere near enough. He needs to be using that jab a lot more in this fight. He needs to be keeping range, taking half steps back, doubling and tripling the jab, and he needs to keep Brian Castano at arm's length, keep on distracting him with that jab, keep him off balance, keep him resetting, and he needs to obviously combine that jab with good footwork. So obviously, Patrick Teixeira is the southpaw. He's fighting a much smaller orthodox fighter. So, obviously it goes without saying, Patrick Teixeira needs to get his lead right foot on the outside of Castano's lead left foot. If he takes that angle, it's going to make it extremely hard for Brian Castano to land that right hand, and he needs to keep on circling away from that right hand, keep on the move, and don't let Brian Castano set, because on the outside, if Patrick Teixeira keeps that angle, keeps the distance, and keeps moving away from Castano's right hand, Castano could potentially find it real hard on the outside to really have any success against Teixeira, and also he's going to find it harder to get on the inside if you've got lead foot control, if you're popping the jab, if you're constantly moving away from that right hand and keeping distance. So the key for Patrick Teixeira is to use those legs a lot more than he's shown in previous fights, use that jab a lot more than he's shown in previous fights, and basically, keep on the move and, ultimately box on the outside and stick to the game plan. On top of that, also, I want to see Patrick Teixeira show a better understanding of how to block an overhand right or a straight right, because I've seen Patrick Teixeira get hit with a lot of right hands in his career as a tall, rangy southpaw. Teixeira's not a guy who necessarily moves his head all that well. He's not one of those guys with super quick reactions who can pull back from a shot or anything like that. So I'm not expecting him to become Roy Jones or Floyd Mayweather, but, a nice tight high guard would suffice. Patrick Teixeira has a horrible habit of dropping his hands and backing up in straight lines. Against a pressure fighter like Brian Castano, that is a no-no, because Castano, he's one of those guys who can close the distance extremely quickly. And the most dangerous thing about Castano, given that flaw by Teixeira, is the fact that Castano can punch while moving forwards. If you're backing up with your chin in the air in straight lines, then a guy like that is extremely dangerous. So Teixeira needs to keep those hands up at all times when he's taking a backward step, because if he shows those same flaws in this fight against Brian Castano, backing up in straight lines with his hands down, more than likely Castano's going to expose that and take advantage of that. So that's one big area where he needs to improve in this fight, And also in this fight, I'm saying that Teixeira needs to box and move, maintain range. Of course, that's very important. But he also needs to be aware not to pussyfoot around and try and point score. At the end of the day, Teixeira's a guy with 32 fights and 22 knockouts. He can punch a bit, so there will be times in this fight where he needs to commit to his shots. He needs to get Castano's attention, because Castano's a guy who appears to have quite a good chin. He's quite robust, and he's going to take some discouraging. You flicking a jab and moving is not really going to discourage Brian Castano. He'll keep on coming. So, Teixeira needs to also take a bit of initiative in this fight. I'm not saying he needs to trade with Castano or anything like that. It'll be stupid, but he does need to, let go of some heavy leather on the occasion. And also one more thing for Patrick Teixeira. One punch he throws very well, in my opinion, is the right hook to the body out of that southpaw stance. And in my opinion, that could be quite a good punch in this fight against the short, stocky pressure fighter, the orthodox pressure fighter in Brian Castano. Again, another way to slow him down, potentially. I thought he'd done a good job against Carlos Adames of working the body, and that right hook to the body was one of the key weapons in that fight. So try and incorporate that into this fight, not as gung-ho, but take some opportunities to work that body, try and slow him down, and reduce his effectiveness as the fight goes forwards. Ultimately, with Patrick Teixeira, I think he needs to show a lot of improvements to win this fight. Teixeira's a good fighter. Don't get me wrong, he's not a bad fighter at all. But to me, having seen a fair few of his fights, I believe there's a lot of flaws there to eradicate going into this fight. And a lot of those flaws potentially could play into Brian Castano's hands. But as for Brian Castano, the MO for him is quite obvious. He's got a 4-inch height disadvantage and a 9-inch reach advantage. Brian Castano needs to get close to Patrick Teixeira. Ultimately, Brian Castano needs to fight his usual fight. Come forward in a compact manner, nice and tucked up, moving the head, slipping the straight punches, and coming underneath and getting on the inside. If he can get to the mid-range or the inside, he's going to have a lot of success against Patrick Teixeira, because, first and foremost, Brian Castano is a much better combination puncher than Patrick Teixeira. He's much more comfortable on the inside. He's got far superior hand speed to Patrick Teixeira, And yeah, if he gets up close, he's going to have a lot of success against Patrick Teixeira. Don't get me wrong, Patrick Teixeira is willing to fight on the inside. He's willing to throw down on the inside. But to me, he's not really all that great at it. Whereas Brian Castano he's a brilliant inside fighter. I actually believe he's the best inside fighter at 154 pounds, to be quite honest. Now, obviously, the key for Brian Castano is getting to the inside. Now, I have to be honest, how I believe this fight's going to play out, I actually don't believe Patrick Teixeira is going to dissuade Brian Castano coming on the inside. I don't think Brian Castano is really going to have to do all that much to get on the inside. But let's say, for argument's sake, that Patrick Teixeira is boxing behind the jab, is moving, is keeping range, then that's going to be a bit harder to get on the inside. And if that is the case, if Teixeira fights that fight like I advise him to, then Brian Castano is actually going to have to work to get on the inside. Obviously, one method of doing that is coming in under the jab, slipping, coming underneath and getting on the inside. Alternatively, you don't actually just have to go underneath somebody's jab to get around it. You can also come in behind the jab. So basically, you would time the jab, make them miss, and then come in as they are retracting their jab hand. Another effective way for a pressure fighter to get up close. And a guy with quick feet like Brian Castano, he can do either or. He can move his head and slip and get on the inside, or he can come in behind the jab, and he's certainly got the ability to do that. And obviously, like I said, he can punch while moving forward. So if you're slipping the jab or coming behind the jab, don't be afraid to throw a counter on the way in. Also, Brian Castano's going to have to really use his feint game if Patrick Teixeira is keeping it long and rangy. Try and draw the lead from Patrick Teixeira, make him miss, get underneath it, get round it, and then get on the inside and do some work. Or just feint and get some sort of reaction out of Teixeira and then explode with a lead power shot. So yeah, if Patrick Teixeira is boxing behind a game plan and he's keeping it long, there are numerous ways for Brian Castano to get on the inside, and he's got the skill set to do it, to be quite honest. But like I said, I don't believe he's going to have to work to get on the inside. I think Patrick Teixeira is going to really give him all of the opportunities that he needs to get his work done. Teixeira, he's got a horrible habit, like I said, obviously, of backing up in straight lines with his hands down, chin in the air. That's disaster against a guy who can punch coming forwards. He also sits on the ropes quite a lot as well, and while he's on the ropes, he's not really all that great at defending himself. He doesn't really roll with shots on the ropes. He doesn't block and parry on the ropes and come back with his own counters. He kind of just sits on the ropes, attempts to shell up, and then kind of fires back with his own shots. Ultimately, when Patrick Teixeira is on the ropes, Brian Castano needs to go to town. Like I said, Castano's got faster hands, better combination punching. He needs to make those moments count against Patrick Teixeira. And against the longer, taller fighter, the rangier fighter, it would be a good idea, obviously, for Brian Castano to work that body. Luckily, Castano is a real good body puncher with both hands, right and left hooks to the body, uppercuts to the body. He certainly needs to target the body of Patrick Teixeira in this fight, the longer, taller man. And yeah, ultimately, this is going to be one of those fights, in my opinion, where pressure busts pipes kind of thing. I just don't believe Patrick Teixeira can live with Brian Castano on the inside. He's going to struggle at mid-range. The key for him is boxing on the outside for 12 rounds. Problem for him, I've not really seen that at a high level from him. He makes too many mistakes. He gives his opponents too many opportunities to get close. He brawls too much. He trades too much. And to me, against Brian Castano, that is a no-no. Patrick Teixeira needs to show a lot of improvements to win this fight. Whereas Brian Castano, he's shown me more than enough that I believe he will beat this current version of Patrick Teixeira. Given all of the flaws that Patrick Teixeira does have, like I said, I don't really believe he's got the ability to box for 12 rounds and win this fight. I just believe he makes too many mistakes. Maybe his best hope is kind of boxing like I said he should do, but then basically nailing Castano with a big shot and knocking him out. I guess that's his best chance in this fight. But to me, the overwhelming favourite is Brian Castano, and I'm picking him to win this fight, more than likely by a late stoppage. Wouldn't be surprised if it's like one of those referee stoppages where Castano's teeing off and the referee just jumps in and waves it off. I just believe Brian Castano is going to walk this man down work him to the body, get him to the ropes, get him to the corner, and it's going to be a slow beatdown. I've got Brian Castano to win this fight by a late stoppage. Teixeira is quite tough. Maybe he can make the distance, but I don't really see him winning this fight without really landing some sort of Hail Mary big shot which knocks out Castano. I've got Brian Castano winning this one. Anyway, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Share your thoughts below. Who do you believe will win this fight? Are you going with the favourite, Brian Castano, or the underdog, Patrick Teixeira? Share your thoughts below. Tell me who you believe is going to win. It's been your guy Delboy. Peace.